All right, everybody, welcome back. So this is Properties of Exponents Advanced. And what we mean by that, advanced, is that we got, a bunch of properties. We got 7 properties. This week we talked about the negative exponent property. So now it's time to put it all together. Now we did a little bit of this yesterday, but now we have, a ton of different properties to apply. We got lots of variables kind of all over the place with lots of different powers. As you can see, we got parentheses within parentheses. So this is like, a pretty good level of rigor for you guys to practice your properties of exponents. So it looks kind of scary, but we're going to go through it here today if you need some extra help. And you also got an answer key to help you out as well. So show your work, check your answers as we go. Now on top here, I have a suggested kind of order to apply the properties of exponents. We've talked about this lots this week and last week. There is a lot of flexibility in the order that we apply these in, because really at the base level this is all multiplication and division, which kind of happens at the same level of PEMDAS, or the order of operations. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you do this, but what I've done here is that this is the most efficient order to do it. This is the way that you're not going to repeat steps, or you're not going to take big numbers to big powers and then have to simplify them. So this is like the not, stepping over yourself multiple times order. Okay, you don't have to follow this order, but it's the one that I would recommend if you want to, get there the quickest. Okay, so let's go through and take a look. First thing we're going to do, step 1, is we're going to add a 1 exponent to anything that doesn't have it. That will just prevent us from making mistakes as we go through. So, for example, if you looked at this 2x to the 0, and you're like, oh, that's going to be a 1, right? Because anything to the 0 power is going to be 1. Well, the 2 is not being raised to the 0 power. It's kind of hard to see that right now because you can't see its exponent. But if you go and put a 1 on it, you can see that it's not being raised to the 0 power. So when we do step 2, apply the 0 exponent property, we're not going to make the whole chunk 2x to the 0. We're not going to make that whole thing 1. We're just going to take the x to the 0 and make that 1. So that will prevent you from making that mistake. The other thing it will prevent you from doing is when you're multiplying exponents, like 3 times negative 2 and 3 times 0, or like 3 times 2 and 3 times negative 4, when you're applying the power properties, a lot of people will do 3 times 2 is 6. But remember, we're not multiplying the coefficients, we're multiplying the exponents. So what we want is 3 times 1, and then that will be 2 to the 3rd power. So step 1, adding the 1 on anything that doesn't have an exponent, will just prevent you from making those 2 mistakes, which is why I recommend doing that first. Okay, from there we're going to apply the 0 exponent property. So anything that's to a 0 power can change to a 1, and we can really just do that by just kind of crossing it out. Just be careful with what you cross out, because we're not crossing out the 2 here. We're just crossing out the x to the 0. And really what we mean when we cross that out is that that's a 1. So we don't really have to worry too much about it. It's 2 times 1, which is just 2. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to apply the product and quotient properties in the parentheses. So as we look inside the parentheses, if there's multiple x's or multiple y's, we're going to put those together by using the product of the quotient property. Now, a lot of people, when we say that, they say combine like terms, but be very careful, because this is not a combine like terms idea. Combine like terms is a plus or minus thing. Okay. Well, here we're using properties of exponents. We're still on number 1. We haven't finished, but just as an example, if we looked over here at number 2, notice that there's a's floating around in there and there's b's floating around in there. So if we have something like that, step 3 is to put the a's together, put the b's together using the product property. Okay. On future problems, we might have quotient stuff to do. Right, so it's basically simplify within the parentheses. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of make the little note to myself. These are the properties that we're applying, but what we're going to do is simplify within parentheses. And actually, we're kind of working our way in to out. So when we do within the parentheses, we're looking at the innermost parentheses, like the inside parentheses, because sometimes there's multiple sets. Okay, so on this problem, going back to number 1, we actually don't have multiple x's or multiple y's in those parentheses, and we don't in there either. So we don't really have to apply step 3 here because there's no simplification that can happen within the parentheses right now. The next step is to remove the parentheses. So now we're going to apply the power properties. There's the regular power property, there's the power of a product and power of a quotient. They all kind of work together, and this is where we multiply the exponents. So anything that's inside the parentheses, we're going to multiply the exponent by that 3, and then we're going to do the same thing over here. So we're going to have x to the negative 4 times 3, y to the 2 times 3. Okay, so that's how we get those numbers. Negative 4 times 3 is negative 12, and 2 times 3 is 6. Okay, we're going to do the same thing over here now. So remember, I just talked about this a minute ago, that we don't want to do 3 times 2 is 6. We want to do 3 times 1. And remember that that's the power of the 2. So it's not 6, it's actually going to be 8 here. 2 to the 3rd power is 8. And then we have y to the negative 2 times 3. Okay, cool. So now what we're going to do is we're going to repeat these steps, where we're going to repeat steps 3 and 4. We're going to keep working our way from inside to outside using the product property, using the quotient property inside the parentheses. Now we actually don't have any more parentheses left, but we can kind of think of this as one big set of parentheses or whatever. We're going to use the product property again to get the y's together. So let's order this up. We got 2 to the 3rd, okay? We got x to the negative 12, we got y to the 6th, and then we got y to the negative 6th. Okay? Now, there's a couple ways to go about this here, because we're actually going to get a 0 exponent, but we're going to apply the product property now that we reordered it. Okay, that's y to the 0. Now, we actually already did the 0 exponent property towards the beginning, but now we see another one. So we're just going to take care of that right now. Y to the 0 is just 1. Okay, step 6, use the negative exponent property to take care of any remaining negative exponents. So now is our cleanup step. We're going to move x to the 12th downstairs. So send it down to the basement, if you remember that analogy from yesterday. And the exponent becomes positive. Okay, and then the last step is to evaluate numbers raised to power. So let's go back and look at 2 to the 3rd, because we can actually evaluate that, which means we can actually get a number answer for that part. And there we go. There's our final answer. Okay, so that's kind of the order that's the most efficient. Now, we could have done a lot of stuff with these negative exponents earlier. We could have moved them down, but you don't really want to do that if they're still changing. Notice that the y's just completely went away. So why bother, moving this y to the negative 6 down if they're just going to go away with the product property later anyway? So some things to think about. Now these are some pretty complex problems, multiple steps, so let's go ahead and check our answer, make sure we're good. Okay, looks like we're on the right track. And let's move on to the next guy. Okay, so we'll go through our order again. So first step is give everything that doesn't have an exponent a 1. That's just kind of a safety step so that we don't make mistakes here. So it's 2 to the 1 and a to the 1. Put that a little bit back further. Okay. Next thing we're going to do is look for 0 exponents. Okay, there aren't any, so we're going to move on to the next one, which is apply the product property and quotient property within parentheses. So simplify within the parentheses. Okay. In this case, we got A's and A's and B's and B's. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the product property here. We got a to the 4th and a to the 1, so we're going to add those exponents. We got b squared and b to the 3rd. We're going to add those exponents. And that's all we're going to do right now. Just doing one step at a time so we don't get messed up. Okay, next thing we need to do, now that we've simplified it within the parentheses, is we're going to remove the parentheses. So everything's going to get this power of negative 1. So we're going to multiply all the exponents by negative 1. So 2 to the 1 times negative 1, a to the 5 times negative 1, and b to the 5 times negative 1. So all those exponents now become negative. Okay. We still have this stuff over here on the right-hand side, or kind of over towards the right. All right, so now we've removed the parentheses. Now we're going to go back and do 3 and 4 again. right? So we're going to apply product and quotient properties. Now we don't have a parentheses anymore because we kind of removed it, but we still want to do that product property, kind of working our way out. So now that we're outside of the parentheses, now we can use the product property again. So we got 2 to the negative 1 up front, that's the number part. I'm just going to reorder this because it's a little bit, there's a lot of stuff going on, I don't want to miss anything. Okay, so those are all my factors. Okay, now we're going to use the product property, so 2 to the negative 1, a to the negative 8, just adding those exponents together, b to the negative 9, again adding exponents. Okay, now we are going to use the negative exponent property. So anything that has a negative exponent, we're going to push downstairs. So 2 to the 1, a to the positive 8, b to the positive 9. And then we'll evaluate anything that is a number raised to a power. So 2 to the 1 is just 2, so we don't really need that 1 there anymore. Okay, and there we go. So we kind of, again, we're working our way from the innermost parentheses to the outside, which is actually kind of normal for order of operations. We're just doing, properties of exponents. We don't have any add or subtract or whatever. But we just want to do, simplify within the parentheses, then remove them, then simplify again, and so on until everything's kind of combined the way it's supposed to be. All right, let's go ahead and double check our answer, make sure we're on the right track. So 1 over 2, a to the 8th, b to the 9th. Okay, looks good. All right, number 3. So same idea. One thing to note on number 3 is that the parentheses do not extend down below the fraction bar. So the stuff that's like this m to the negative 3 is not being taken to that negative 2 power. So just kind of pay attention to that. All right, so step 1, let's add some 1s. Okay, so n to the 1 right there, that's it. Okay, step 2, look for all your 0 exponents, so n to the 0, that's going to be a 1, we'll get rid of that. All right, step 3, we're going to look inside of our parentheses and simplify within the parentheses. So we got m's, we had 2 n's, but this one canceled, so that's fine. So let's put these two together. So we have m to the 5 plus negative 5, so that's m to the 0, n to the 1, over m to the negative 3. Okay, as soon as we get that next 0 exponent, let's get rid of it and make it a 1. Okay, so then we got n to the 1 to the negative 2 over m to the negative 3. Okay, so now we got to remove the parentheses by using the power properties, which means we're going to multiply exponents here. So n to the negative 2 power over m to the negative 3 power. Okay, we don't have any more parentheses, so we're good there. We don't have to repeat anything. But now we're going to use the negative exponent property. So this guy's going up, this guy's going down. M to the positive 3, n to the positive 2. Okay, let's double check our answer. Oops. Looks good. All right. Okay, number 4. So again, anything that doesn't have a power, we're going to give it a power of 1. We're going to look for our 0 exponents, which I don't see. We are going to simplify within parentheses. So notice those y's that we can use the product property on. So we're going to have 2 to the 1, x to the 2, and we're going to add those exponents using the product property. On the top we have x to the negative 4, y to the negative 5, and let's not forget this guy. Okay, so we kind of talked about how order of operations is very kind of flexible for properties of exponents. However, we can't do any like simplification here until we take care of that 5. So that's actually kind of the same as normal. We got to deal with the parentheses first before we can start simplifying the fraction. So now we got to remove the parentheses. So we're going to multiply all these exponents by 5. So on the top we still have this x to the negative 4, y to the negative 1. On the bottom we have 2 to the 1 times 5. Okay, now remember, that's not 10. We're not doing 5 times 2. We're doing 5 times 1, the exponent. And then we're making sure that that's the power of 2. We have x to the 2 times 5. Now that 2 can multiply that 5 because it's an exponent. And then we have y to the 55. Okay? All right, now from here, we would use the quotient property. Okay. Now you actually could, if you wanted to, you could move these two guys down here, and you could then use the product property. So like if you move x to the -4 down, you get x to the 4 times x to the 10. You could do it that way. Y to the -1 you can move down, and that will become y to the 1 times y to the 55. So you could do it that way. I think it's an extra step if you do it that way. Well, I guess it's kind of about the same, but typically I just, instead of moving things multiple times, I like to just move things one time. So let's do it. If you follow this order, you could prevent yourself from doing extra work in some situations. In this situation, I think it's going to be about the same. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do the quotient property. All right. So anytime you do the quotient property, when we subtract the exponents, the variable is going to go on top. So we have x to the -4 minus 10, y to the -1 minus 55. Okay, so I'm just subtracting the exponents. We still have a 2 to the 5 on the bottom. We'll take care of that in a second. But we use the quotient property and subtract the exponents. So we're going to have x to the -14, because -4 minus 10 is -14. We're going to have y to the -56 over 2 to the 5th. Okay. Now we haven't moved any negative exponents yet. Now that they're all settled, now that they're not changing anymore, now is the time that I would move them. So we got 2 to the 5th. I'm going to move the x to the 14 downstairs and the y to the 56 downstairs. Those exponents will become positive. All right, so that's cool. We have this as the 2 to the 5th. And then the 2 to the 5th we can change. That's going to be a 32. It's 2 to the 5th power. And then we got it. Okay, so from this step, again, there's a couple different ways to do it. And in this case, in this problem, if you would have moved these down and then did the product property, you probably could have gotten there in about the same amount of steps. However, sometimes what happens is you move stuff so all the exponents are positive, and then when you subtract or something, you end up with negative exponents later anyway, and then you have to move them again. So typically what I recommend is that you use your negative exponent property like at the end of the problem instead of using it multiple times in the middle of the problem, because again you might have to do it over and over and over to fix stuff that keeps becoming negative. So this is the way I would do it, but there's multiple ways to go about it. Okay, so for number 4, let's check our answer here. 1 over 32 x to the 14 y to the 56. Okay, looks good. Okay, we're going to stop the video now. I'll make another video for the back page, but that's the front page, and hope that helps you out and gets you kind of more comfortable with these properties of exponents.